When you think about the absolute edge of existence, like the rarest living things on Earth, your mind probably jumps straight to animals on the brink.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Like you picture the Amur leopard, right, prowling through the snowy forests of the Russian Far East, and there are fewer than 30 of them left in the wild.
Right. Or, the vaquita porpoise navigating the murky waters of the Gulf of California and trying to dodge illegal fishing nets.
Yeah.
There are maybe 10 of those left. It's just a heartbreaking image.
Yeah.
And it gets a lot of conservation focus, which it should.
Exactly, it should. And then there's the Javan rhinoceros. You picture these massive, prehistoric-looking creatures wandering through the waterlogged forests of Indonesia, and there are roughly 75 of those remaining. We track them, we mourn them, we put them on the covers of magazines, to raise awareness.
We do. We're very animal-focused.
We are. But here is the thing that completely stopped me in my tracks today. The rarest living organism on the planet, the species closest to the absolute void, it isn't an animal at all. It is a flower.
It is a very specific, very heavily guarded flower. Earth's loneliest flower, really.
The Middlemist red camellia and its global population. Like, if we are talking about primary original mother specimens that carry the unbroken historical lineage.
Yeah, the real deal.
Exactly, two plants left on the entire face of the Earth.
It is the absolute definition of biological isolation. I mean, unlike the rhino or the leopard, the story of this flower isn't just a straightforward modern tale of habitat loss.
Right.
It is this wild 200-year saga of imperial ambition, sheer luck, and honestly obsessive botanical detective work.
And that's exactly what we are going to do today on this deep dive. We are acting as botanical detectives for you. We are going to piece together this unbelievable survival story.
It really is unbelievable.
It is. We're tracking the Middlemist red from the imperial gardens of China across these perilous 19th century oceans to two highly isolated glass houses situated at the absolute opposite ends of the Earth.
And we'll also look at the modern, highly lucrative black market it inadvertently spawned.
Yes, the scammers.
Oh, the scammers are fascinating. And we want to explore what its deeply precarious existence actually tells us about the nature of extinction.
So we've been digging through some fascinating archives to put this puzzle together for you.
Yeah, a massive stack of sources. We are pulling from modern horticultural reports from the Royal Horticultural Society, extensive 19th century ship logs, which are just wild to read.
They really are.
Plus historical archives from Chiswick House in London and the Waitangi Treaty Grounds in New Zealand, and even some rather alarming current e-commerce data from the rare plant trade.
Right, because we have to look at the whole picture. So to understand how an entire species dwindles down to just 2 sentinels, we first have to investigate where it came from and the geopolitical forces that ripped it from its natural habitat. But before we even get into the high seas and the 1800s, there is a plot twist right out of the gate.
A classic botanical misnomer.
Yeah, because if you are trying to picture the Middlemist red in your mind right now, it isn't actually red.
No, not at all. It's a label that stuck 2 centuries ago and just, was never corrected.
It's so funny. If you look at the archival photos we've been poring over, the color is stunning. It is this deep, incredibly vibrant pink. It has these soft, silky, heavily ruffled petals that are layered in a very full, complex, almost rose-like structure.
It's gorgeous.
And the blooms span 3 to 5 inches across, and they are set against these incredibly dark green, thick, glossy leaves. It just looks like a luxury item. It looks heavy and expensive.
Well, because in 1804, it was precisely that. It was the ultimate luxury commodity. And that is where John Middlemist enters the picture.
Right, the guy it's named after.
Sure. Exactly. He was a nurseryman and botanist operating out of Shepherd's Bush in West London. And at the dawn of the 19th century, Middlemist traveled to China.
Which was not a simple trip back then.
Not at all. We have to remember that China at this time was a highly restricted environment for Europeans. Trade was strictly confined to Canton.
Right, so foreigners weren't just wandering the countryside taking whatever they wanted.
No, absolutely not. He had to navigate a very tense, highly regulated trade port just to get his hands on it.
And once he managed to collect this specific camellia cutting, he had to transport it back to Britain.
Right, aboard an East Indian vessel. And eventually, it was presented to the Royal Botanic Gardens, Kew.
But I want you to stop and picture that journey for a second. It's 1804. This is the height of the Napoleonic Wars.
Yeah, the high seas are literally a war zone.
You are on a wooden sailing ship for a journey of thousands and thousands of miles, which could take anywhere from 4 to 6 months.
And Middlemist is trying to keep a delicate, exotic, living plant alive without modern climate control, without artificial lighting.
And fighting off the salt spray of the ocean.
That's the craziest part. It required intense, daily, obsessive horticultural care. I mean, they didn't have those sealed glass Wardian cases that revolutionized plant transport later in the 1830s.
Right, the Wardian cases were like mini greenhouses, but he didn't have those.
Exactly. So Middlemist would have been dealing with heavy, awkward pots, manually rationing fresh water.
Which, by the way, was already a scarce resource for the human crew on a long voyage.
Oh, absolutely. And he's constantly shifting the plant around the deck to protect it from harsh storms or scorching equatorial sun.
So the fact that it survived the boat ride is basically a statistical anomaly.
It really is a miracle.
And the reason he and others like him went to such extreme, expensive lengths connects to the broader psychology of 19th century Europe. There was this total obsession with exotic flora, specifically from Asia.
Yeah, these weren't just pretty flowers for the garden. They were intense status symbols.
They represented imperial reach.
Exactly. Having a camellia in your conservatory signaled to your peers that your wealth and influence extended across the entire globe. You had mastery over nature and geography.
To put the economics into perspective, based on the historical nursery catalogs we examined, a single rare camellia at this time could cost a fortune.
Oh, yeah. The equivalent of half a year's wages for a domestic servant.
Half a year's salary for a potted plant. I mean, you wouldn't even let someone breathe on it.
No, it was guarded like treasure.
But this intense commodification leads to a really dark, tragic twist in the story. By the 1820s, just a couple of decades after John Middlemist took his cutting and boarded that ship, the Middlemist red was entirely wiped out in its native Chinese habitat.
Gone. Completely gone.
Driven to extinction in the wild in the blink of an eye, historically speaking.
Yeah, the commercial demand from Europe triggered a massive ecological collapse for this specific flower.
The sources outline this perfect storm of aggressive overcultivation by local nurseries trying to meet European demand, plus general environmental destruction as the port areas expanded.
Right, and just the sheer volume of international extraction.
It makes you think of a terrible paradox. It's like a team of art thieves pulling a priceless painting out of a museum to sell it to a billionaire, but the act of cutting it out of the frame accidentally burns down the entire museum.
That is a brilliant analogy.
So, is it fair to say that the imperialist drive to commodify this flower is the exact thing that preserved its genetics, even as it destroyed its ecological foundation?
I mean, yes. That is the deeply uncomfortable truth at the heart of this plant's history.
Yeah.
The European desire to own the exotic, to lock it away in private heated glass houses, effectively created a living archive of a species that was collapsing in the wild due to those exact market pressures.
It's so wild to think about.
If John Middlemist hadn't treated this plant as a highly valuable commodity to be extracted and sold, the Middlemist red would simply be a ghost.
We might only know it from a single watercolor in a dusty botanical book.
Exactly. European imperialism inadvertently built a lifeboat for a species it helped push off the cliff.
Which forces us to look at the lifeboat itself, or rather, the two lifeboats. Because the original plant that John Middlemist heroically kept alive on that ship and gave to Kew Gardens, it mysteriously vanished.
Lost entirely to history.
Just gone.
Yeah, it may have succumbed to a cold snap, or maybe a fungal infection, or honestly just simple mismanagement. It's a stark reminder that simply bringing a plant to a botanical garden doesn't guarantee its survival.
So the survival of the entire species came to rely on a fractured, highly vulnerable lineage of clones taken from that original plant before it died. How on earth did the last two remaining clones end up separated by 11,000 miles?
Well, we have to trace the cuttings through the elite networks of the time. By 1823, a cloned descendant of that original imported plant appeared in the private collection of William Cavendish.
Okay.
He was the 6th Duke of Devonshire, famously known as the Bachelor Duke.
And the Bachelor Duke is a character you could build a whole movie around.
Oh, absolutely.
The archives describe him as this fabulously eccentric, infinitely wealthy collector. He wasn't just casually into gardening. He had a massive private menagerie on his estate.
Yes, he had endless resources and a burning passion for the exotic.
And he had the infrastructure to support that passion on a scale that few others could match.
Right. At his Chiswick House estate in West London, he utilized a 300-foot-long glass conservatory.
300 feet.
Huge. This structure was a marvel of early 19th century engineering. It was designed by the architect Samuel Ware and completed around 1813.
And it wasn't originally for flowers, or...
No, it was originally meant to grow exotic fruits. But by 1828, the Duke had transitioned it into a dedicated camellia house.
Wow.
He was aggressively sourcing these incredibly rare specimens from elite nurseries and housing them under this massive expanse of glass.
Which, naturally, required an army of gardeners to maintain. Heating a 300-foot glass house in the harsh London winters of the 1820s involved massive coal-fired underground flues.
Yeah, flues that had to be stoked day and night.
So this glass house becomes Sentinel number 1, the fortress for the Middlemist red in the Northern Hemisphere.
Exactly.
But Sentinel number 2 has a completely different vibe in a completely different world. We have to travel across the globe to New Zealand.
Specifically to a place called the Waitangi Treaty Grounds, located in the Bay of Islands.
Right. It's the early 1830s. The historians in our sources pinpoint the planting to around 1833 or 1834.
Mm-hmm.
Agnes Busby, the wife of James Busby, who was the first British resident in New Zealand, takes a pink camellia and plants it in a sheltered little spot near a stream on their sprawling estate.
And we really need to unpack the immense historical and cultural weight of this specific location. Waitangi isn't just a scenic garden.
No, it's massive historically.
It is the site where New Zealand's founding document, the Treaty of Waitangi, was signed in 1840 between the British Crown and over 500 Maori chiefs.
So the single flower is rooted in the exact soil where the modern nation of New Zealand was politically born.
Exactly. And today, that very same plant stands as the oldest recorded camellia in the entire country.
But if you think about it from Agnes Busby's perspective, like, why go to the trouble of importing a Chinese flower cultivated in Europe all the way to New Zealand in the 1830s?
Right, especially since New Zealand already has incredibly lush, beautiful, unique native flora. What was the goal?
Yeah.
It was a very deliberate, albeit perhaps subconscious, colonial strategy.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Put yourself in the shoes of early European settlers. They are arriving after a grueling voyage in an environment that is biologically and ecologically completely alien to them. The native bush of New Zealand didn't look like the manicured estates of England.
Not at all.
So by bringing European cultivated, Asian-derived ornamental plants to the Pacific, they were trying to establish a sense of familiar order. They were essentially terraforming the frontier to create a domestic anchor.
Wow, so it was a way to project stability and European botanical dominion over a landscape they found wild and intimidating.
Precisely.
It's fascinating because it means the garden wasn't just landscaping. It was a psychological mechanism for the settlers.
It was comfort.
Yeah, comfort. And what I find so compelling is how the head gardener at Waitangi manages this today. According to the modern reports, they don't just ignore the colonial implications.
Right. They carefully curate these colonial heirlooms like the Middlemist red right alongside native Maori plants.
Which are referred to as taonga, meaning treasures.
Yes, it transforms the garden into a physical, living dialogue between cultures. It acknowledges the complex colonial past, the imposition of foreign ideals on a native landscape, while simultaneously honoring the indigenous ecosystem.
That's a really beautiful way to handle it. The plant is no longer just a symbol of British expansion. It's a living witness to history, preserved in a shared space.
Exactly.
So we have our two fortresses, Sentinel 1 at Chiswick House in London, standing amidst the fading aristocracy, and Sentinel 2 at Waitangi in New Zealand, bearing witness to the birth of a nation.
Two isolated sentinels.
But having established where they are, we have to look at the terrifying reality of what Sentinel 1 survived, because the history of the UK specimen reads less like a botanical journal and more like a Hollywood survival thriller.
Oh, the physical threats to the London glasshouse were staggering. If we jump forward into the 20th century, the Grand Chiswick Conservatory had fallen into severe disrepair.
Because the Bachelor Duke's era of infinite wealth was long gone.
Right. The estate had passed through various tenants, and the simple reality is that maintaining a 300-foot glass and timber structure is astronomically expensive. The wood rots, the iron rusts, the glass cracks.
And then comes World War II, the Blitz. Imagine you are standing in the gardens of Chiswick House in the early 1940s. London is being bombed relentlessly. The night sky is filled with sweeping searchlights, the deafening wail of sirens, and anti-aircraft fire.
Terrifying.
And the conservatory is already crumbling from neglect. And then the bombs start falling directly on Chiswick. German bombing raids shatter the glass of the conservatory roof. Shrapnel and massive, jagged shards of heavy Victorian glass are raining down on these 200-year-old camellias.
And here is the detail from the historical archives that just defies belief. An active German bomb actually struck the glass house.
I still can't get over this.
It crashed right through the fragile roof, plummeted toward the soil, and inexplicably failed to detonate.
It just slammed into the dirt and sat there.
Huh?
A massive, unexploded bomb resting inches away from the rarest flower in the world.
Yes.
If that fuse had worked, if the mechanism hadn't jammed, the Middlemist red is instantly vaporized. Half of the global population of this entire species erased in a fraction of a second.
The lineage survived by sheer, dumb mathematical luck.
It did. But survival by luck is not a sustainable conservation strategy.
Definitely not.
And the threats didn't end when the war did. By the late 20th century, the threat transitioned from high explosives to something biological. And in many ways, this was a much more insidious, agonizing threat.
Right. The mealybug invasion.
A virulent new strain of mealybug infested the neglected, weakened plants in the Chiswick Conservatory. And the biology of this infestation is incredibly gruesome.
It really is. Mealybugs are tiny, sap-sucking insects. They latch onto the stems and the undersides of the leaves, insert their feeding tubes, and literally drain the vital fluids out of the plant.
That sounds awful enough on its own.
But the insects themselves aren't the primary killer. The real danger is what they leave behind. As they feed, they excrete a sticky, sugar-rich waste product known as honeydew.
And it coats the entire foliage.
Yes.
Honeydew sounds so innocent, almost like a botanical perfume, but it is an absolute death sentence for a plant.
Because that sticky layer of sugar acts as the perfect incubation zone for a dark, powdery fungus known as sooty mold.
Oh, gross.
Yeah, this mold rapidly colonizes the honeydew, turning the vibrant green leaves entirely black. It acts like a thick, impenetrable blindfold on the plant.
So it completely blocks sunlight, halting photosynthesis.
Exactly. The plant can no longer produce energy. It slowly suffocates and starves to death in the dark.
So you have this ancient plant, already traumatized by decades of neglect, structural collapse, and fallen glass, now being slowly suffocated by this creeping black mold.
It was effectively in a botanical ICU.
And this brings us to the 1994 rescue operation, which introduces the modern heroes of our story.
Yes, 3 local members of the International Camellia Society, Herb Short, Jane Callender, and Marigold de Cinder.
What a team.
They recognized the historic magnitude of the collection dying in that glasshouse, and they volunteered to step in when the institutions couldn't.
And we really have to emphasize the grueling, painstaking manual labor this involved. Because the plants were so fragile, so incredibly close to systemic failure, they couldn't just come in with pressure washers and harsh industrial pesticides.
No, the shock would have killed the camellias instantly. They had to act like surgeons.
The horticultural reports describe them hand-washing individual leaves. Picture yourself standing in a massive, drafty, ruined glass house for hours on end, taking a soft sponge and carefully, gently wiping the black mold and sticky honeydew off thousands and thousands of individual leaves.
One by one.
One by one.
They were pruning back the dead wood millimeter by millimeter, applying highly targeted, careful pest controls so as not to overwhelm the plant's weakened immune system.
And their dedication saved the physical plants, but the physical rescue was only half the battle.
Right, because the other half was an archival mystery.
How so?
Over the century of neglect, the physical tags identifying the hundreds of plants in the conservatory had rotted away, fallen off, or been misplaced.
Oh, no.
So they had a massive glasshouse full of recovering anonymous camellias. They didn't know exactly what they had.
Which kicks off a 10-year botanical detective project. I mean, how do you identify a plant when it's not blooming and you have no label?
They had to scour the archives. They were digging up East India Company ship logs from the early 1800s.
Wow.
They were dusting off old Victorian-era nursery catalogs. They were comparing the subtle variations in leaf shape, the serration on the edges of the foliage, and the exact structure of the recovering petals to 150-year-old botanical watercolors.
That is dedication.
And finally, in 1999, after a decade of cross-referencing, they formally and officially identify the Middlemist red clone. They realized the rarest flower on Earth has been quietly suffocating in West London.
It was a monumental achievement, a triumph of both horticultural skill and historical scholarship.
It absolutely was.
It was. But I have to push back a little bit on the fairy tale ending here.
Oh, absolutely.
Because we celebrate this rescue, we rightly celebrate Herb, Jane, and Marigold. But I was looking at the recent heritage reports, and the Chiswick Conservatory itself was recently added to Historic England's Heritage at Risk Register.
Yes, it is.
The 1930s timber and glass structure is highly fragile. It requires a multi-million-pound restoration just to keep it from collapsing. So I have to ask, are we actually celebrating a permanent victory here? Or are we just celebrating a temporary stay of execution for a plant that is entirely dependent on an aging, crumbling glass building?
That is the pivotal question of modern conservation. What does survival actually mean? We must acknowledge the extreme precarity of this situation.
Right.
Cultivation in a glasshouse is not the same as thriving in an ecosystem. The Middlemist red is not part of a natural food web. It is on highly artificial, incredibly labor-intensive life support.
Yeah.
If the funding dries up, if a severe storm collapses the weakened timber roof, or if the heating system fails during a freeze, the entire UK population is wiped out.
Oh.
The plant has lost its evolutionary independence. It relies entirely on human intervention, human architecture, and continuous human funding.
That is a terrifyingly fragile thread to hang an entire species on. If I were a conservationist looking at this, my first instinct would be, why is it so fragile? If we know we only have 2 left, why can't we just take the flowers, gather 1,000 seeds, and plant a whole field of Middlemist reds in a secure, modern facility? Why is the population still so low?
That's the logical next step, but
The physical threats to the glasshouse are daunting, yes, but the Middlemist red's own biology is fighting against us.
and this is where the science gets incredibly stark. We have to look at the biophysical mechanics of having only 2 primary clonal lineages left in the world.
Okay, lay it on us.
When your global population consists of 2 clones derived from the same original mother plant, your genetic diversity index is absolute 0.
0. There is no variation whatsoever.
None. To give you a comparison, if this were an animal species, let's go back to the Amur leopard we mentioned at the start.
Right.
A genetic bottleneck this severe would cause immediate mutational meltdown. Inbreeding depression would be catastrophic.
So it would just collapse.
Completely.
Yeah.
Recessive genetic mutations would compound, the immune system would collapse, fertility would plummet to 0, and the species would effectively be biologically defunct within a generation, even if a few individuals were still physically breathing.
So why hasn't the flower died from that? If an animal would collapse, how does the plant survive with 0 genetic diversity? I assume it has to do with how plants reproduce.
Precisely. Plants possess a remarkable biological advantage called totipotency.
Totipotency.
Essentially, many plant cells retain the ability to divide and differentiate into any part of the plant. Roots, stems, leaves, whatever is needed.
Wow.
This allows them to bypass the need for sexual reproduction entirely through vegetative propagation or cloning. You can cut off a branch, and it can grow into a whole new, genetically identical organism.
Okay.
They don't suffer from inbreeding depression because they aren't breeding at all. They're just endlessly replicating the exact same genetic code.
But that sounds like a double-edged sword. Sure, it keeps them alive, but it means they have 0 adaptive capacity. If the environment changes, they can't change with it.
That's the fatal flaw. Without sexual reproduction mixing up the DNA, there is no genetic variation to offer resistance to new threats.
Right. They're sitting ducks.
Exactly. If a new, highly contagious fungal pathogen sweeps through London or New Zealand, the plant cannot adapt. If one clone is biologically vulnerable to the fungus, they're all entirely vulnerable. A single disease could wipe out the entire species in a matter of weeks.
And the tragedy really deepens when you look closely at the flowers themselves. We talked about how beautiful they are, these big 3 to 5 inch vibrant pink blooms. The plant puts an enormous amount of metabolic energy into growing them.
It really does.
But the sources reveal a really heartbreaking truth about these flowers. They are functionally sterile.
Yes. Despite producing these magnificent blooms that look perfectly designed to attract pollinators, DNA and cytological analyses confirm extreme pollen infertility. The flower completely fails to set viable seeds.
So the reproductive machinery is just broken at a cellular level.
Completely broken.
It's like the flower is putting on this beautiful, elaborate performance. The lights are on, the stage is set. It looks incredible, but the theater is totally empty.
That's exactly it.
It's doing what millions of years of evolution designed it to do, bloom to attract a bee or a bird, but it can never result in new life. It cannot reproduce naturally, ever again.
It is a profound biological dead end. And because sexual reproduction is impossible, the survival of the Middlemist red relies entirely on the human art of vegetative cloning.
Right.
And this is not something you can just do in your kitchen by snipping a piece off and sticking it in a glass of tap water on the windowsill. It is a strictly regulated, highly technical, and notoriously difficult propagation method.
So if you are the head gardener at Watangi and you are tasked with creating a backup clone just in case, how do you actually force this ancient, sterile plant to grow a new root system?
It requires extreme precision and timing. First, the botanist must take what are called semi-hardwood cuttings, usually 6 to 8 inches long.
Okay.
The timing is paramount. This can only be done in late winter or early summer, when the cellular structure of the wood is at the exact right stage of maturity. Too soft, and it rots. Too hard, and it won't root.
That's a tiny window.
It is. Once they take these cuttings, they have to treat the exposed nodes with specialized synthetic rooting hormones.
Basically a chemical signal that tricks the stem cells into differentiating and becoming root cells instead of more stem.
Exactly. It forces a biological pivot. Then, these treated cuttings must be maintained in an environment of extremely high humidity to prevent them from transpiring and drying out before the roots form.
How do you do that?
They use clear nylon bags to create individual micro-greenhouses, or they place them in a highly specific, well-draining substrate made of perlite and peat. Sometimes they even use specialized misting chambers. And they have to monitor them in this incredibly vulnerable state for 1 to 2 months, praying that the roots take hold without succumbing to fungal rot.
That sounds incredibly stressful. What happens if the cutting refuses to root? Is there a backup plan?
The alternative is a process called grafting, specifically cleft or side grafting.
How does that work?
This involves surgically slicing a small piece of the Middlemist red, the scion, and physically attaching it to the robust, already established root system of a much more common, vigorous camellia species.
Oh, like Frankenstein.
A bit, yeah.
Yeah.
You bind the two wounds together and wait for their vascular systems to fuse. It is literal botanical surgery.
And obviously this isn't a free-for-all. I mean, anyone who visits the Watangi Treaty Grounds or Chiswick House can't just hop the fence with a pair of shears and snip a piece off to try grafting it at home.
No, absolutely not. The security protocols are immense.
As they should be.
The Royal Horticultural Society in the UK and the New Zealand Camellia Trust rigorously control this entire process. Every single authorized propagation is meticulously tracked.
They track every single leaf, basically.
Essentially, yes. The tools are sterilized, the environments are controlled. This is to prevent the introduction of pathogens. Remember, a single dirty pair of shears could introduce a blight that ends the species.
Right.
And it's also to preserve the absolute genetic integrity of the clones. They treat the plants with the security of a biological vault.
Which makes total logical sense when you consider what's at stake. You have 2 mother plants left. But human nature being what it is, whenever you have something that is uniquely rare, deeply beautiful, and locked behind strict institutional gates, a vacuum is created.
Oh, inevitably.
And where there is a vacuum of supply, someone is going to try and make a quick buck by exploiting the demand. Which brings us to the dark side of this conservation story, the black market of botany.
Yes.
Because the genuine flower is so intensely guarded and biologically stubborn, a deeply cynical shadow industry has risen up around it.
The world of rare plant e-commerce has exploded in recent years, and it is a fascinating, highly unregulated, and frankly hazardous space.
It is the Wild West out there. Let's walk through this bizarre online ecosystem. If you go online right now, and I mean right now, on massive mainstream marketplaces like Etsy, eBay, or Amazon,
Yeah, try it yourself.
you can type in Middlemist red camellia, and instead of getting 0 results for the rarest flower on Earth, you will instantly find dozens of listings.
It's infuriating.
People selling packages of super rare Middlemist red seeds or fresh unrooted cuttings, and they are charging anywhere from $16 for a tiny packet of seeds up to $140 for a stick with 3 leaves on it.
And we really need to break down the biology of why this is highly fraudulent and why consumers are being entirely taken advantage of.
Let's do it.
First, let's look at the seed listings. As we just discussed in detail, the Middlemist red is functionally sterile. It does not and cannot produce viable seeds.
Period.
Therefore, any seed sold under the name Middlemist red is biologically fake. It is an impossibility.
So what are these scammers actually mailing to people when they spend 20 or 30 bucks on these seeds? What's going to grow?
They are likely mailing seeds from very common, visually similar, fully fertile camellia cultivars. For example, alba plana or Mathotiana alba.
Okay.
Or they might be sterile hybrids of other camellias that won't even sprout. These common cultivars are beautiful plants, but they are absolutely not the rarest flower on Earth.
And people don't know the difference.
Exactly. The genius of the scam, from a criminal perspective, is the time delay. The seller relies on the fact that it takes years for a camellia seed to germinate, grow into a bush, and finally produce a bloom.
Oh my God.
By the time the buyer realizes the flower isn't a Middlemist red, 5 years have passed. The buyer has forgotten the purchase, the return window is long gone, and the seller's account has probably vanished.
It's the perfect slow-motion crime. The evidence literally takes 5 years to bloom. But the cuttings, the listings for unrooted stems, that's where this moves from a simple financial scam into something far more dangerous.
Yeah, significantly more dangerous.
Because people are mailing raw plant material across borders.
Yes, and this is where the scam becomes a genuine ecological threat. Shipping unrooted stems in the mail, bypassing agricultural regulations and inspections, carries a massive risk.
Oh, so?
These stems are vectors. They can transport systemic fungal pathogens, microscopic glasshouse pests like the mealybugs that nearly wiped out the UK specimen, or devastating agricultural blights across state or international borders.
Wow.
A single infected cutting bought on eBay could introduce a disease that decimates local agriculture or native flora.
Let's contrast this chaotic fake market with the authentic market, because very rarely you actually can buy a legitimate Middlemist red, right? It's not completely impossible.
It is possible, but it operates on a completely different level of rigor.
Right?
On the rare occasions that genuine, institutionally verified clones are made available to the public by authorized botanical gardens, usually as a highly publicized event to raise funds for their conservation, the experience is entirely different. They cost between $320 to $480. And crucially, they don't arrive as an unrooted stick in a padded envelope.
Yeah, you're not getting an Amazon box.
No. They come fully rooted, grown in sterile soil to prevent pest transmission, and they are accompanied by official DNA verification certificates proving their direct lineage to the mother plants. You aren't just buying a plant, you're buying a registered piece of biological history.
It's an incredible contrast. It reminds me of those people who sell authentic moon rocks on the internet. You pay $50, and a week later you get a piece of gray gravel from a driveway in Ohio, complete with a fake certificate printed on cheap paper.
That's exactly what it's like.
The plant scammers are preying on the exact same human impulse. It preys on the public's deep-seated desire to hold a piece of natural history, to own something uniquely, unimaginably rare.
It's a powerful psychological driver. But the tragedy is that this fake market actively threatens real conservation efforts. It confuses the broader market, and it creates a false sense of abundance in the public consciousness.
Right. People see 50 listings on Etsy and think, oh, the reports must be exaggerated. It's not that rare. I can buy it right now.
And it simultaneously introduces profound biological risks through the illegal shipping of uninspected plant material that could threaten the actual living sentinels.
It is incredibly frustrating, but it really highlights the strange, chaotic, modern ecosystem this plant is forced to exist in. It's fighting mealybugs, it's dodging WWII bombs, it's fighting the reality of its own genetic sterility, and now it's fighting internet scammers who are diluting its legacy.
It's been a long 200 years for this flower.
Which brings us to the end of our deep dive today. We need to step back and look at the sheer scale of this sprawling journey we've just uncovered.
It is a remarkable, deeply improbable timeline of survival.
Just to recap the sheer improbability of this plant still existing, we started with an 1804 voyage on a wooden ship out of a restricted port in Imperial China, navigating the treacherous high seas, while a botanist desperately rationed fresh water for a potted plant. We watched that plant's clone take root in the Bachelor Duke's glittering, coal-heated 300-foot glass house in London as a symbol of staggering wealth.
And then the other clone.
Yes. We traced another clone 11,000 miles to a colonial planting in New Zealand that quietly witnessed the birth of a nation. We held our breath as an unexploded German bomb slammed into the dirt just inches away during the Blitz.
Still wild to me.
And we witnessed the painstaking millimeter-by-millimeter rescue from suffocating black mold by 3 dedicated volunteers who spent 10 years scouring Victorian archives just to figure out what they had saved.
Yeah.
And today, we see it battling complete genetic sterility, reliant entirely on human cloning, while a cynical online black market tries to sell its ghost.
It is the ultimate survivor. But As we reflect on this epic journey, there is a final, quietly haunting thought we have to confront about what this survival actually means.
What's that?
Vegetative propagation, the act of taking cuttings and cloning this plant over and over again, creates a very dangerous, comforting illusion.
Oh, so
Because the physical form of the plant persists, because it still puts out those beautiful, vibrant pink blooms at Watangi and Chiswick House every year, we look at it and forget how close to the void it actually is.
yeah.
The genome is frozen. The evolutionary clock of the Middlemist red stopped ticking 2 centuries ago. It is no longer adapting. It is simply lingering.
And that is the exact thought I want you to mull over as we wrap up today. If the crumbling timber of the Chiswick glasshouse finally gives way tomorrow, if the heritage funding dries up, or if a single unmitigated fungal outbreak sweeps through the Watangi Treaty grounds next month and the clones can't fight it off, we wouldn't just lose a flower.
No.
We wouldn't just lose a pretty pink bloom for the garden. We would instantly, irrevocably erase a living, breathing archive of 19th century globalization. The story of the Middlemist red forces us to confront a really haunting reality about conservation in our modern era. For the rarest species on this planet, survival is no longer a natural process.
No. It has become entirely artificial.
It is an artificial, highly fragile construct. The Middlemist red exists in this murky, precarious space between life and permanent extinction, held together by glass walls, synthetic rooting hormones, and human memory. It survives today only because we decided it was too valuable, too beautiful to let it slip away. Keep your curiosity alive, everyone, and the next time you walk past a garden, never stop questioning the unseen histories, the sheer luck, and the human effort it takes to keep the rarest things in our world breathing. We'll see you next time.